Respected faculties and colleagues, please give a big round of applause for both the speakers. So after 3 years of long efforts, finally we have been successful to have here in IIT Kanpur. We are a bit delayed of schedule. Very soon we hope to have a full house and start our proceedings.
IIT कानपुर बोला पीपीटी स्लाइड है।
स्क्रीन शेयर्ड है आपकी, क्या करना है?
सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी सुभाष जान हिंद है, सुभाष शान हिंद है। सुभाष आन हिंद है, सुभाष मान हिंद है। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए है, नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी। गली गली कली कली ये अंधलेब चली। गली 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 ये आम खल्क गा रहे। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए है, नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी। तूफान हिंद लाएंगे, वो शान हिंद लाएंगे। फिरंगियों की कौम पर वो कहर बन के छाएंगे। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए है, नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए है, नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी।
Respected audience, everybody is requested to keep their phones in either flight mode or in silent mode throughout the duration of the talk. Okay. So respected faculty members and colleagues, we welcome you all to a two-talk session. It is of sheer joy and excitement for all of us that after 75 long years, the statue of the liberator of India, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, is now finally there on Kartavya Path, formerly known as the Rajpath. Amidst the ongoing nationwide celebrations of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, today we have with us two prime researchers to enlighten us about Netaji. With the ongoing 75 years of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebrations nationwide, it is in best sync to know about the liberator of India, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose. And there cannot be any better combination of speakers than Chandrachur, Ghosh and ANuj Dhar. We have with us Shri ANuj Dhar. Shri ANuj Dhar is an Indian non-fiction author born and brought up in New Delhi, who has devoted approximately 25 years of his life researching on Subhas Chandra Bose. He worked as a journalist in Hindustan Times, and after his initial short stint there, he has authored 7 books till now. 6 of them are on Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, mostly uncovering lies and propagandas encircling the Netaji's disappearance mystery. His 2012 bestseller, India's Biggest Cover-Up, has inspired the hit 2017 web series Bose, Dead or Alive, which starred Rajkumar Rao. We also have with us Shri Chandrachur Ghosh. Shri Ghosh is an Indian author, researcher, and commentator on history, economics, and environment. He completed his BSc in botany from Vishwa Bharati Shanti Niketan and MSc in Science and Technology for Sustainability from SPRU, University of Sussex. He also holds a postgraduate diploma in Environment Management from IIS WBM Kolkata. Bose, The Untold Story of an Inconvenient Nationalist, his latest biography on Netaji, has been the bestseller on Amazon. They co-founded the group Mission Netaji long back in 2005, forcing the government of India to declassify over 10,000 pages on Netaji. They have co-authored 2 books, Conundrum, Subhas Bose's Life After Death, which is another bestseller, and Government Doesn't Want You to Know This. Their profound research on Netaji's disappearance has also inspired the hit movie Gumnami, directed by Srijit Mukherjee. Shri Anuj Dhar's another research topic has been the mysterious death of our second Prime Minister, Shri Lal Bahadur Shastriji, in 1966 at Tashkent. Your Prime Minister is Dead is the book authored which covers all possible aspects of Shastriji's death. It inspired the 2019 film The Tashkent Files, directed by Shri Vivek Agnihotri. Now, I request Honorable ADSS Sir, Shri Anuj and Shri Chandrachur to come on stage and garland the photo of Netaji. Now, ADSS Sir will welcome both the speakers with bouquets. In today's talk, many lesser known aspects of Subhas Chandra Bose's life will be covered. The pivotal role he played in India's freedom struggle, his charisma, his uniqueness as a leader and a military strategist, and the relevance of his thoughts and ideas in today's context will be discussed by Shri Chandrachur Ghosh. So now, I request Shri Chandrachur Ghosh to enlighten us on how an Indian civil services officer transformed into Desh Nayak and then became the beloved Netaji for his countrymen. Shri Chandrachur Ghosh.
Hello. Audible? Am I audible? Okay. না না ওটা ঠিক আছে আমি Namaskar. Good evening. Firstly, thank you very much. Thank you to the students and the organizers for having me here, for having me and Anuj here. It's always a pleasure to talk to the students. Fresh ideas, new questions, and discussion, interaction is always much more livelier than old fogies who sit in TV studios. But TV studios are also a nice place to learn history. You get new perspectives, new angles which you have never dreamt of, never imagined of. So that's one place where you have practical application of the history that you know, that you learn and learn new things. But it's a pleasure always to be in a campus and talking to students. तो आज मैं जो करने जा रहा हूँ यहाँ पे कोई हिस्ट्री का लेसन मैं आपको देने वाला नहीं हूँ. आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू टीच यू बोरिंग हिस्ट्री. हिस्ट्री इज बोरिंग. बट द थिंग अबाउट दिस टॉपिक is that it's not history, and it should be clear to you that yesterday when the statue of Netaji was inaugurated at the heart of India's capital, at the center of the seat of power in our country, that means something. All the words spoken, the reactions that came in from around the world, from across the world, it should be enough to indicate that we are not really talking about history. Even if it is history, it has continued to impact, to influence our present day politics, our present day thoughts, our present day actions. So it's a very much live matter. It's not to be confined to history books. But before I get into the topic, let me just quickly play the same song which was just played in a different version with a little bit of different visuals. I need some help here. There is no keyboard, right? How do I get out of it? No, I need to get out of this, to a different window. Escape. Well, that will do. Thank you.
हमारे हाथ में है क्या? हमारे रास्ते में आएगी भूख, प्यार, तकलीफें, मुसीबतें, मौत. कोई नहीं कह सकता है जिन लोग इस जंग में शरीक होंगे उनसे कितने लोग निकलेंगे जिंदा होकर. कोई बात नहीं है हम जिंदा रहेंगे या तो मरेंगे, कोई बात नहीं है. बात कोई सही बात यह है, आम बात यह है, आखिर में हमारी कामयाबी होगी, हिंदुस्तान आजाद होगा.
सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए। है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी सुभाष जान हिंद है, सुभाष शान हिंद है। सुभाष आन हिंद है, सुभाष मान हिंद है। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए। है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी तूफान हिंद लाएंगे, वो शान हिंद लाएंगे। फिरंगियों की कौम पर वो कहर बन के छाएंगे। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए। है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए। है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए। सुभाष जी
Now the big question is, although this happened yesterday, and it's a matter of pride, it's a matter of great happiness that the Prime Minister was there to inaugurate this statue, replacing, it's very symbolic, replacing the statue of the King Emperor, which was removed in 1968. So that's one direct comparison of the status, whose statue was removed and whose statue has been put there now. That's one thing. But the other thing is, why did it take so long? Well, one can always argue, give reasons that this is the 125th birth anniversary of Netaji, so this is the most opportune time. This is also the 75th anniversary of our independence. Now that is one connection which I never forget to mention everywhere I go, is that the difference between Netaji's year of birth, which is 1897, and our independence, 1947, is 50 years. So by a stroke of luck or divine intervention, or call whatever you want, whenever India's independence will be celebrated, the same year Netaji's birth anniversary will also have to be celebrated. They cannot be separated. And this doesn't happen with anybody else. So the question is then, why now? Why so many years later, 75 years after India's independence, why did it take so long? And that's the reason why I chose to call the biography as the untold story of an inconvenient nationalist. This is something we need to keep in mind. He is inconvenient nationalist. What I mean by it, I will explain it in the subsequent slides. मैं बहुत ज़्यादा time नहीं लूँगा. I will keep it brief, and then I will take questions from you. It's rather keep it interactive than me lecturing. So this is just a quick recap. What all did he do? 1947 is 1897, and the time he disappeared was 1945. So he had a span of 48 years. Out of those 48 years, his public life was barely 25 years. So in that span, he left so much impact. And these are the rare kind of people, rare kind of personalities that we have had in our country, like Netaji, like Swami Vivekananda, like Shankaracharya. They have remained in public life for a very short span of time, but even with that short span of time, they have left so much impact that centuries later, people still feel them, still feel the power of their ideas. So that is this kind of man. Now he was, you know most of the story. He was born in Cuttack in 1913. He came to Kolkata to study in the Presidency College. 1916 he was expelled because there was a fight between the students and the teachers, and one of the European teachers was beaten up. बहुत मार पड़ी उनको. So it was said that the complaint was that Subhas was responsible for it. By that time Subhas was the leader of the students, obviously, but much later he came out. He didn't open his mouth. He took the blame entirely on himself and he was rusticated. He took the risk. He did not let the punishment go to the other students who were actually responsible for beating up that professor. And that came out much later. So he was expelled, then he got admission after sitting out for 1 year. He got admission in Scottish Church College and took a training in the India Defence Forces for some time. And that's where, because he wanted to join the army, but because of his poor eyesight, he could not get into the army. He was not admitted. And then he went to Cambridge. Why did he go to Cambridge? The idea was to see the world outside, to learn, to gain knowledge. But his father put the condition that I will send you abroad only if you study for ICS, only if you appear for ICS. So by the time he reached Cambridge, he had just 8 months to appear for the ICS exams. And ICS exams are not easy. And he had to study for his course and he had to prepare for the ICS. Even then, he stood 4th in the ICS exams of that year. And he stood 4th because he missed out a large part of answers in his Sanskrit paper. What happened is कि translation का बहुत एक number होता था. Sanskrit to English, English to Sanskrit. There used to be those passages, you know, in old style examinations, these used to carry a lot of marks, particularly in humanities. So what he did, जब translate कर रहे थे, he translated first in the rough paper. And by the time he was done, there was no more time. So he couldn't copy it into the main answer sheet. So he lost, although he did the translation, he lost out that a huge chunk of marks. Probably he would have stood first if he had been able to complete that exam. So from there he resigns, obviously making his parents very unhappy. They were not at all happy about it. It took a long time to convince them. So he comes back, and before he comes back, he has already got in touch with the second most popular or the most important leader, nationalist leader of that time, Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das. And he comes, meets Gandhi in Bombay. He's not happy. He's a young lad of 24 with very revolutionary ideas, with a lot of energy. And he's not impressed by Gandhiji's answers. He feels that Gandhiji's ideas lack clarity. So with disappointment, he goes back to Kolkata, meets Chittaranjan Das, and in the first meeting he is floored. And he realizes that this is the man that I had been looking for. And that's how he becomes his mentor. Deshbandhu becomes Subhas's mentor. And for the next 3 years, he learns the ropes of India's politics. He is still not a politician. He's still not got into the party politics and the maneuvers and intrigues and all those things. But he was accompanying Chittaranjan Das everywhere as his secretary and learning the things. But started looking from very close quarters how decisions are made in the Congress, how the Congress was being organized, what Deshbandhu was doing. So it was a learning phase for 3 years. In 1924, Chittaranjan Das had left Congress and formed his own party, the Swaraj Party. And Subhas had, of course, joined him. So Chittaranjan Das appointed Subhas as the chief executive officer of the Kolkata Corporation. But within 6 months, he is packed off to jail, to Burma. He is not even given a reason as to why he was being arrested, why he was being sent, and he was not told for how long. So just imagine, in those days, an ICS officer who has quit his job there, he did not join the ICS, but qualified, so his status is huge. He is the CEO of the corporation. He is arrested and packed off to jail in another country almost, and kept there for 3 years without being told what are the charges and when he would be released. So his health breaks down and all, so he comes back from there and joins politics. comes to Congress. This time he actually joins the Congress politics. And by that time, unfortunately, Deshbandhu was dead. So Deshbandhu is dead, he joins, and the first thing that happens is he got those 3 years in prison, which was enough to break anybody's mind and body. His body actually broke down. He was suffering from tuberculosis, and it took him many months to recover and come back to public life. But what he did, he utilized those 3 years to prepare himself mentally. So he studied a lot. He interacted with the other revolutionaries who were imprisoned with him. He understood how things happened and prepared himself. So by the time he was back, he was ready to take a plunge into politics. So he joins 1928. He goes to the Kolkata Congress. That year, the annual session of the Indian National Congress was organized in Kolkata. And by that time, he is very prominent. So this is Subhas Bose standing here. And that year's president, Motilal Nehru, Jawaharlal's father, and this is Subhas. This is Jatindra Mohan Sengupta, who was the more senior leader in Bengal at that time. So Subhas organizes a corps of volunteers in military style. And that's the first time that happens in Congress's history. And that makes Gandhiji very, very unhappy. He is mighty unhappy that this is a circus. Things are not supposed to happen like this. We are non-violent people. We are a poor country. Why do you put up this kind of show? Why do you dress them in military uniform? Why do you make them march like an army? So he was not at all happy with that. But even things went even worse when during the Congress session, Gandhiji proposed that Congress should take up the idea of dominion status. It was not yet time to ask for independence. India should go with dominion status. India will be happy if it is made a dominion. That's the time when Subhas stood up and said, no way, we are not happy with dominion. Complete independence is our goal. And Subhas's resolution to that effect lost with a very small margin. And Gandhiji was again very angry, of course, mad with him. So it was decided, and that time Subhas and Jawaharlal Nehru had started working together. They had come together, their ideas matched, their thought process matched, their personalities matched. But Jawaharlal Nehru had only one problem, that he used to vacillate. And whenever it used to be a time to take a decision, even if he had an opposite idea, he held opposite ideas himself, he would ultimately surrender to Gandhiji's ideas. So he would not stick with anybody else. That was the main problem with him at that time. But here it was then decided, because the old guard, the old school and the new school, the clash was happening and it was very real. So the old school had to decide, they had to agree that, okay, fine, let's go with this dominion status idea for 1 year. And there was a proposed constitution which was prepared by the Congress party under Motilal Nehru. If the British government does not accept our constitution, then next year we will declare that independence is our goal. So that was a compromise reached. So next year in Lahore, this independence resolution is passed on 26 January 1930. And that's how 26 January gained the importance. But there also, Subhas went another step ahead. He said, what's the point of just declaring independence? It's not going to take us anywhere. Let us just declare, let us just work for forming a parallel government. Let Congress is a national organization, let its volunteers, its leaders go out across the country. Let's challenge the British Empire. Let's challenge the British government. We have our own people, we have our own machinery, we have the will and the ideas. Why can't we do it? So Gandhiji was very, 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 very annoyed, and he was very caustic in his remarks. And as a result, Subhas was removed from the working committee. He was elected to the working committee previously, but he was removed. Then in 1930, he becomes mayor of Kolkata. Then the civil disobedience, I'm not going into the details because it can take a lot of time. He is arrested and then sent off to Europe in 1933. Then again, this is the second exile, the second 3-year exile. He is packed off. This treatment was not given to any other leader of those years No other leader was treated like this. Nobody was considered to be that kind of threat who had to be again and again sent out of the country. But this was a different kind of person they were dealing with, and the British very well understood it. And he was always surrounded with British spies. Other than the police force, the plainclothes police people, there were plants within the Congress organization who used to report on him. While going through the British documents, police documents, I realized that at any point of time there were at least 27 spies around him who were reporting constantly to the police. His every activity, his every conversation, where he was going, what he was thinking, and that did not stop even when he was in exile. So as a result, you all know about the book that he wrote, The Indian Struggle. That's what he wrote in 1934. It was published. So even when he was writing the manuscript, he was drafting the ideas. Before it was published, that manuscript reached the British government. So they had the outline of the book, not the manuscript. I wouldn't say the manuscript. There was the outline, the detailed outline of the book had reached the British government. So somebody very close to him who had access to him was spying on him. We don't know who, but the result is visible. So from there he comes back, and in 1938 he becomes the Congress president. Then the final break with the Gandhian leadership happens in 1939-40, and 41 he leaves India and forms two governments in exile, one in Europe, another in Southeast Asia, and 1945, obviously, of course, we don't know what happened after that, or that's what we think. That's what we like to think. But we will be talking about the post-1945 scenario tomorrow. Anuj and I will discuss with you all the possible theories and everything, and what we have found through our research. Many of you already know about it, and that's a mystery. There is no doubt that it's a mystery. It has been a mystery for a very long time, and a large part of it still remains a mystery. But while writing this biography, I realized that even his life is no less a mystery. This is just an example of how little we know about him. These are the number of pages in published works, in collected works. Mahatma Gandhi's collected works for the time period when Netaji was in public life, 1921 to 1945, roughly 25 years. That's nearly 30,000. Jawaharlal Nehru's is 9,000, and Netaji's only 3,000. So 1/3 of Nehru and 1/10 of Gandhiji. That's the number of published pages. That's how little we know about him. And there is so much information spread all over the world in libraries, in archives, in private collection. Nobody has made the effort to put them together. And that's something in this 125th birth anniversary we have asked for. This is, we have asked the government to publish his collected works, and this is what the government should do. This is not the job of a family or any private initiative. It's only, the scope is so massive, it's only the government that can take up the entire responsibility, finance it, and see to it that a proper collected works comes out. So this campaign is still on. You can still go to change.org and sign it. I would request all of you to sign it. Alternatively, you can just scan the code and it will automatically take you to the campaign page. Now, let's come to the interesting bit. That was history. Much of it is known to you. Now, let's face the difficult questions. Now, one of the first things, one of the central points that ran across all the TV debates yesterday, and the same thing happens every time the government does something about Netaji, is partisan politics. It happened on 23rd January. It happened last time when the Andaman Island was renamed. It happened when the Prime Minister hoisted the flag on 21st October from the Red Fort. Every time that BJP is appropriating Netaji. Netaji is a leftist, secular, person, politician, BJP cannot appropriate. Now the question is BJP appropriating? कि बीजेपी का तो हो ही नहीं सकते, तो किसके हैं नेताजी? हैं किसके? कांग्रेस के, कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी का, सोशलिस्ट पार्टी, हिंदू महासभा, मुस्लिम लीग? whose icon, whose ideology did Netaji follow? That's the burning question, the central question, and that has to be answered very properly and understood very properly if you don't want to fall. Today itself, a very prominent Congress leader tweeted in this. Yesterday, throughout the channels, all Congress and other non-BJP parties, they kept accusing. They were not celebrating the fact that a statue had been erected after so long in the center of the capital of the country. Their concern was that, oh no, ये तो बीजेपी ने ले लिया इनको, अब हम क्या करें? So that was the concern. That was the heart burning that was happening. And now let's go one by one. So was Subhas a congressman? Was he a Gandhian? Subhas was a congressman. From the start to end, he remained a congressman. There is no doubt about it. But it is also the truth that he was thrown out of Congress. And if he considered himself a congressman, even after that, it was because of the ideals that he followed. It did not have to be that he had to be a member of the Congress organization, the forerunner member of the Congress organization, spinning charkha and all that thing. That's a different interpretation. But speaking organizationally, in 1939, he was thrown out of Congress. Now, many people will say, whenever you talk about the Gandhi-Subhas clash, the first thing they will tell you, अच्छा, बकवास कर रहे हो, पर नेताजी ने तो गांधी जी को फादर ऑफ द नेशन बताया था, और तो ऐसे कैसे हो सकता है? How could they have any difference? Difference सबके होते हैं. There are inane arguments given. हाँ, बहुत सारे opinion एक साथ होते हैं. There are always difference of opinions between leaders and all. No, sir. Difference of opinion is one thing, but having completely different world view, completely different vision about free India, those are two very different things. So, ये एक narrative चलता आ रहा है for the last 75 years that नेताजी ने गांधी जी को father of the nation बोला है. So, there was really no difference between the two. Now, I already told you that his first impression about Gandhiji, when he met him as a 24-year young lad, he was not impressed. He thought Gandhiji did not have clear ideas. Uske baad 1928, 29, 30, the clash increased, their distance increased. Personally, individually, he had a lot of respect for Gandhiji. He never hesitated to admit that it was Mahatma Gandhi who reawakened the political consciousness of the country. It was Mahatma Gandhi who reorganized Congress. जो एक elites, कुछ elites के restricted meetings होते थे. Congress used to be that some elites would meet in a pandal, they would argue, fight between themselves, pass some resolutions, go home. Some of them would join the legislature, be elected in the legislative assemblies and some municipalities when they were allowed. And that was it. And they would just keep asking, requesting the government that give us more power, give us more power, give us more power. Then when Gandhi came into the political scenario, he actually took that politics to the masses. पूरे देश में आम आदमी, आम औरत के पास पहुंच गए वो. That was his biggest contribution in 1919-20. There were many other things, many other criticisms about Gandhi, but that is one single aspect which nobody can take away from him. That was his biggest contribution. He brought politics to the door of the common person, the common man, and opened the doors of Congress for the common man to come and take part in its decision making, to raise their awareness. So Subhas never hesitated to acknowledge that and give him credit. But the difference, political difference of ideas was stark. So this is a letter. This is one of the examples which is lying in a foreign archive. Till today, this has not been published properly. So one of my friends went to Paris In the Paris archives, she got it out from there. When Subhas was in exile in Europe, one of the very old politicians joined him there to recuperate. His health was not okay. He was suffering, and towards the end of his life, and they got along very well. That leader's name was Utkal Patel, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's elder brother. And together they discussed politics. Together they talked about India's future, what needs to be done, what can be done, what should be done. And Vittalbhai Patel was so impressed with Subhas that on his deathbed, he gave a huge chunk of his property to Subhas so that he could use it for his political campaign, to take the idea of India's freedom outside, campaign for it, and spend it the way he deemed fit, spend it the way he wanted to. So that was a donation entirely to Subhas. In his will, he left that property in his name. Now, this is a letter, not a letter, this is a joint statement issued by Vittalbhai Patel and Subhas Bose from Vienna on 9th May 1933. And this is the language they are using. That this is the time when Gandhiji had withdrawn the civil disobedience movement and said that we are not going to do anything, Congress is not ready, the country is not ready, we are not non-violent enough. There is too much violence all around. We cannot fight the British under this kind of mindset, under these kind of situations, circumstances. And so let's just do constructive activities. What is constructive activity? Spin the charka, stop people from drinking alcohol, and Harijan Seva karo. So this is constructive activity. ऐसे हमारी आज़ादी आ जाएगी और कुछ मत करो, कुछ ज़रूरत नहीं है. So from Vienna, these two, one very young person and one very old person, they got together and issued this statement that the latest action of Mahatma Gandhi in suspending the civil disobedience movement is a confession of failure. As far as the present method of the Congress is concerned, we are clearly of opinion that as a political leader, Mahatma Gandhi has failed. The time has therefore come for a radical reorganization of the Congress or a new principle and a new method. So this is a clear statement. One cannot get clearer than this, that they are telling Mahatma Gandhi that as a political leader, you have failed. We need a new organization. We need a new method. We need a new leader. This is clear. So for those who love to say, oh, but he respected him. So of course he respected. Respect, हम सभी बड़ों की इज्जत करते हैं. कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है उसमें. But that does not mean that I subscribe to the other person's, my elders' thoughts, principles and beliefs. That was Gandhiji. And similarly, like when the fight happened, when the final fight between Subhas Bose and the Gandhian leadership happened, he is writing this to his nephew about Jawaharlal Nehru. जैसे गांधी जी के बारे में बोलते हैं लोग, पुराने जो चलता आ रहा है, the old narrative. This is the established narrative, and it has gone so deep down in our minds that we have forgotten almost to ask questions. We have taken these as axioms. These are established, self-established truths. नेताजी ने गांधी जी को फादर ऑफ द नेशन बोला था, full stop. आगे हम सवाल करना भूल गए हैं. But when you peel off the layers one by one, a very different truth comes out. And that is the truth that you should be acquainted with. अगर गांधी जी के साथ ये है, पंडित जी के साथ क्या है? They were great friends. Subhas Bose and Jawaharlal Nehru were great friends. झगड़ा तो होते रहते हैं. अब हाँ भाई, झगड़ा तो होते रहते हैं, पर किस तरह के झगड़ा? I mean, can you imagine that? I mean, if today's, because of your age group and the generation in which you are growing up, if I have to give you an example, for example, if today Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi come face to face, they will exchange pleasantries. Of course they will. They're civilized people. But does that mean that they will ever walk together? Can you even imagine it? So don't say that they were friends and they were thinking alike and so they would have gone fine, everything would have been fine. Don't tell me that. Of course, yes, there is some truth that they had gone together to a great extent. But when the push came to shove, Subhas went ahead, Jawaharlal stepped back to stay with Gandhian philosophy, to stay with Gandhian ideas. None of them were ready to break with Gandhiji. And this is what at that time Subhas was writing to his nephew, that nobody has done more harm to me personally and to our cause in this crisis than Pandit Nehru. What more do you need? Do you need a bigger certificate than this? Panditji was giving it back. So he was writing to one of his colleagues that Subhas has gone off the rails and has been behaving badly in many ways. What do you mean by behaving badly in many ways? I mean, this is a school student or college student. Apart from principles and politics, Subhas's methods of work are difficult to put up with. So he is raising a lot of questions about Subhas's mode of operating, his ideas. So at the same time, Subhas, what is he saying about Gandhism? This latest phase of Gandhism with its sanctimonious hypocrisy. This is a very, very strong language. Very strong language. This latest phase of Gandhism with its sanctimonious hypocrisy is sickening to a degree. One is forced to wonder which is a greater menace to India's political future, British bureaucracy or Gandhian hierarchy. Please understand, इसको समझिए आप. ये जो comparison है बहुत खतरनाक comparison है. At one stage of his political career, Subhas Bose is throwing the question कि आजाद भारत के लिए कौन सा ज़्यादा खतरनाक है? Which is a bigger risk? The Gandhian hierarchy or the British bureaucracy? This is a very deep fundamental question. And even after this, if somebody wants to mix them together, there is nothing more to say. And in continuance of that, in another letter to his elder brother Sharad Bose, Subhas is writing, if power goes into the hands of such mean, vindictive and unscrupulous persons, when Swaraj is won, what will happen to this country? Gandhiism will land free India in a ditch if free India is sought to be rebuilt on Gandhian non-violent principles. India will then be offering a standing invitation to all predatory powers. This letter is written in 1940. And we saw the demonstration of the effect, how far-sighted he was. We saw the example in 1962. When we were busy spreading the message of non-violence and love to convince the world that we are just good people, we don't need police, we don't need army, we don't need politics, we just need to go around lecture everybody that we are good, you also become good, let's all stay together peacefully. And 1962 happened. And the reaction in public mind amongst lawmakers was such that even newspapers around the world, outside India, they noticed that at that point of time, the others noticed, the other countries, other newspapers, other journals which were abroad, they noticed. You will not find that in Indian newspapers or Indian writers. They noticed that people had started talking about Netaji Subhas Bose. That if he had been here, this would not have happened. These were reported in newspapers abroad, in international newspapers, not in our newspapers. Our historians will not tell you this story. So this is the real nature of their relationship. And this is a cartoon. This was done during the 1939 annual Congress session, Tripuri Congress session, when Subhas Bose was compelled to resign. And Chakravarti Rajagopalachari, who made a very strange remark, that he compared Subhas Bose with a leaking boat, and Mahatma Gandhi's boat as the proper one where everybody should take shelter. Everybody should take Mahatma Gandhi's boat. So this cartoon shows that Rajagopalachari is trying to get into Mahatma Gandhi's boat and Subhas Bose is pulling his leg to get onto his. And so he is shouting, just leave me, chhod do mujhe. So difference, these are the differences, these are the real underlying political feelings. So when Subhas Bose was finally thrown out of Congress, this was 1939, he was forced to resign. But in 1939, later in 1939, this resignation happened in April. But in August, September 1939, he was actually suspended. And who wrote the resolution of the Congress Working Committee which suspended throughout Subhas Bose from the Congress Party? It was Mahatma Gandhi. If I tell you just like that, most people will not believe me. They will contest me, they will attack me, they will say you are making up stories, fantasy stories, you are not telling the truth. This is Mahatma Gandhi's statement in the newspaper. Subhas Babu resolution was drafted by me, and he justified that not to take action would have amounted to abdication of primary function. What is the primary function? To throw that man out of the party? The thing is that when we consider the relationship between Gandhians and Subhas, it is not just historical. The crux, the center of that conflict was that the Gandhian High Command, the people whom we call the Gandhian High Command, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel, Raja Gopalachari, Kripalani, there were many more, Shankar Rao Deo, many more. They all built their political stability and career around Gandhiji. If you think I will be blunt, none of them had an independent existence, political existence without Gandhiji. And that was the key difference with Subhas Bose. Subhas Bose's political career was built completely outside Gandhi's zone of influence. And he was the only person who stood outside the Gandhian zone. जो लक्ष्मण रेखा है, सारे बाकी सारे लक्ष्मण रेखा के अंदर है. Subhas Bose was the only person standing outside. So they could not have gone together. They could not have collaborated beyond a certain point. And when Gandhiji did not remain, when Gandhiji disappeared from the scene after his death in 1948, that did this Gandhian coterie, did they stick together? No. They all scattered because Gandhi was absent. There was no balancing, holding power. So Kripalani went out, Rajagopalachari went out, Patel and Nehru fought. They couldn't stay together anymore because the cementing factor was Gandhi. They were dependent on Gandhi. Gandhi vanished, they scattered. Subhas's case was very different. He built his own political career without the help of the Gandhian High Command or the influence of Gandhi. And this is something which at the fag end of his life, Pandit Nehru had to admit. I don't know what made him admit this, but at least for once he was honest while talking to a lady journalist, a foreign lady journalist, I think in 1963 or so. I don't know if it had been a male Indian journalist, if he would say that, admit that, but he did finally. And he said that it is true I did let Subhas down. That's a very big statement. It is true I did let Subhas down. I did it because I had realized that at that stage, whatever one's views might be, the way India should develop, Gandhi was India. Gandhi was India for Nehru and for the other Gandhians. For Subhas, India was India. Gandhi was not India. Gandhi was a venerable politician, leader who could be respected, loved, but he was not India. India is much bigger than that. But for these people, Gandhi was India. And that's why they depended on Gandhi for everything. And he made this striking admission. So I subordinated myself to Gandhi, although I was in agreement with Subhas. मैं सुभाष के साथ सहमत हूं, पर मैं उसके साथ चलूंगा नहीं, क्योंकि मुझे गांधी के साथ रहना है. Does that even make sense? Does that tell you about a thinking, principled person? So again he repeated, I suppose it is right to say that I let him down. That's Subhas and Gandhian. Did it end there with Subhas's disappearance? No. In 1940, it continued. And that is why the first question I raised, that why now? Why did it take so long to erect that statue there? It is because of this mentality, this strong dislike. Subhas was out of the zone. वो लक्ष्मण रेखा के बाहर है, उनको अंदर आने नहीं देना है. और ये जो नैरेटिव है, नैरेटिव जो बिल्ड किया गया है, that has to be the Gandhian Nehruvian narrative. Usme there is no place for Subhas. And this continued, this was visible immediately after independence. When the All India Radio wanted to do special functions, programs on Netaji's birthday, 23rd January 1948 and 1949, Sardar Patel shot it down. He was the Information and Broadcasting Minister. He said nothing doing. We don't do programs like that. हमारे लिए सिर्फ ऐसे प्रोग्राम सिर्फ गांधी जी के लिए बन सकता है, किसी और के लिए नहीं. So we will not allow programs like this to be made on Subhash. In 48, there was a strong protest from the workers there. Somehow he had to give in. तो किसी भी तरह कुछ कर लिया, program बन गया. Bidhan Rai also intervened. He understood the Bengali sentiment of the time, so he intervened. He advised Sardar Patel that let it be, let them do it. So somehow grudgingly he agreed in 48. It happened. 49, repeat of the same story. This time, the team of artists put their foot down. They said that if the program on Netaji does not happen, we will not perform. They went on a strike. And leading the strike was the biggest superstar of those years. Most of you wouldn't know about it. Her name was Kanan Devi. So Kanan Devi of those years, equivalent to, I don't know, I mean, who is the lady superstar? I can remember, say, so I can give you like the Hema Malini of yesteryears, or Sri Devi or Madhuri Dixit, the hold that they had over audience in terms of entertainment, in terms of song, dance, music. Kanan Devi was of that status. So can you imagine Sri Devi going for a strike, saying that I will not perform unless a program on Netaji is done? Kanan Devi did it. So he had to give in. That was the deeply ingrained thought against, the feeling against Subhas. Whose was the first portrait hung in the Central Legislative Assembly? Any guess? I think it's very easy to guess. It's Mahatma Gandhi's. There is no prize for that. And when was it done? It was done in 1948. When was Netaji's photo put up? 1978. 30 years. It took 30 years to put up his photo in the Central Hall of the Parliament. And that also happened because of the consistent campaigning by certain individuals like Samar Gua and his friends in the Janata Party, Atal Bihari Vajpayee and others. Janata Party had just come to power. The Prime Minister was a person who was not a big fan of Netaji, but at least he could look beyond immediate Congress interests. So, and the Prime Minister was another example that Gandhiji did not remain, he could not remain in Congress, because although he was a staunch congressman, Morarji Desai. Morarji Desai was a strong follower of Sardar Patel, a strong congressman, but he had to move out of Congress. He could not stay in Congress. So this photo, this portrait was put up, that is the president, and Samar Goa is the person sitting right at the right hand corner. This photo was put up in 1978. There was consistent attempt, demands at that time to rename the Andaman Islands Shahid and Swaraj, the names that were given by Netaji. Ultimately, it had to happen in 2018. So that's the relation, that's the deep-seated dislike for Subhas Bose within the official Gandhian, Nehruvian narrative and their worldview. So don't ever make any mistake about that. But equally funny is the politics about Subhas being a leftist. Was Subhas a leftist? Yes, of course he was a leftist. But what do we mean by leftist? Are you an economic leftist? Are you a social leftist? What is your leftism? Has anybody defined anybody's leftism? Even by that standard, every political party is a leftist party in our country, because our election law states that all political parties will have to be socialist. So everybody is a leftist in our country. Who is not? So, of course, he was leftist. He had leftist economic ideas which were based on socialism, redistribution of wealth, upliftment of the poor through state intervention. Of course, those are leftist, traditional leftist ideas. So by that standard, he was leftist. But the party which have made him his own, claimed him, that is the pure appropriation. That Subhas Bose is our party leader. That was the Forward Bloc. Now, when Netaji quit Congress, he formed Forward Bloc. Forward Bloc, the party Forward Bloc that he formed, organization that he formed, was not a separate party as such. It was a pressure group within Congress. It was much later, just before he was leaving the country, sometime before he was leaving the country, he reorganized Forward Bloc as a separate party. But still, the link was there. Somewhere the link was there. It was the left organization, the left party within the Congress. But Forward Bloc came out of the Congress later on, and that was natural, that was justifiable. But then it got with the other left, proper left parties, the Communist Party of India, the RSP, the CPI, the CPIM, and its branches, they all get together and created a strange, weird animal called Left Front. And so Left Front claimed Netaji as their icon. Wasn't that appropriating Netaji? Wasn't it appropriating Netaji when Gandhians and Nehruvians said that Subhas is a congressman? Isn't that appropriating? So appropriation happens from all political groups. Everybody wants to appropriate Subhas because Subhas belonged to none of these groups exclusively, and very sadly, he belonged to everybody. And as it said, that what belongs to everybody belongs to nobody. So for other politicians, you will see there are specific constituency. There are specific interest groups. For Baba Sahib Ambedkar, there are specific support groups. For Bala Sahib Thakare, there are specific support groups. For the South Indian politicians, there are specific support groups. These are their constituencies. Subhas Bose rose so much above these specific groups that he has no specific constituency. So everybody feels for him, everybody loves him, everybody adores him, admires him, but nobody stands up for him. There are very few people who stand up for him and fight for him. That's the tragedy of this, of our history. Now, the relationship between Communist Party and Subhas went through many ups and downs. Initially, they were very supportive as long as Manavendranath Roy, M.N. Roy, who was one of the founders of the Communist Party of India, he was in charge. He was very supportive of Subhas. They had a good working relationship. And their relationship was so good that for some time, even the British government suspected that Subhas had become a communist. So this is a very curious line which Subhas wrote from Mandalay jail to his elder brother, that my political complexion is not so red as some interested and malicious people have led the government to think. So he is clearly declining. He is clearly denying the fact that he has any communist inclination. And again he writes sometime later that if I had the remotest intention of, and this also shows his attitude, his feelings for Indian communists who left India and became leaders, global leaders of revolution. So India did not matter anymore. They had to bring in revolution across the world, be it Mexico or be it Chile, be it USSR, be it Germany. Revolution had to be brought globally. Let whatever happened to our own country, it doesn't matter. If I had the remotest intention of becoming the Bolshevik agent, I would have jumped at the offer made and taken the first available boat to Europe. I could then have joined the gay band who trot about from Paris to Leningrad, talking of world revolution and emitting blood and thunder in their utterances. सब मुंह बोली बात है, मतलब हम तो ऐसे बात करके हम revolution ला देंगे पूरी दुनिया में. But I have no such ambition or desire. So this is again as clear as one can get. And for a time, they came close, the Communist Party and Subhas came close based on certain programs, that certain things had to be done, and they were thinking alike. But there was always an undercurrent of distrust. The Communist Party was very worried that Subhas was addressing the same constituencies which they wanted to capture. कौन थे ये लोग? सुभाष बोस जाके बात कर रहे हैं एज अ पॉलिटिकल लीडर, किन से बात कर रहे हैं? लेबर यूनियन से बात कर रहे हैं, स्टूडेंट से बात कर रहे हैं, यूथ से बात कर रहे हैं. ही इज ट्राइंग टू ऑर्गेनाइज द यूथ, ऑर्गेनाइज द स्टूडेंट, ट्राइंग टू मेक देम अ मिलिटेंट फोर्स. उनका सुभाष का प्रोग्राम क्या था कि he was not always supporting the revolutionaries, he was admiring them, he was talking very well about them, but he was also scolding them. Okay, what are you guys doing? You have tremendous potential, you have tremendous courage, but tell me, show me one country जहाँ पे 2 बॉम्ब और आधा पिस्तौल लेके कहीं you could have driven away a foreign power like the British Empire, such a powerful guy, such a powerful empire. So organize yourself, wait for the right time, build an underground organization across the country, students, youth, labor, farmers, bring them together, teach them discipline, train them properly, get arms, then rise at one moment. And this is what he was very close to do just before he was arrested in 1940. So ये उनका plan था, and this was clashing with the interest of the Communist Party, because the Communist Party also wanted to capture the youth, the students, the labor, the farmers. So they were not happy about it. They were not very happy. And when Subhas went out and joined the Axis, took the help from the Axis, he didn't really join the Axis bloc. He took help from them because the Axis bloc saw the potential in him and agreed to help. Then their real color came out. So Tojor Kukur and all those, you know. I mean, this is Subhas Bose. This is a Japanese general riding a donkey with Subhas Bose's face. And Subhas Bose as a spokesperson of the Nazi government. That's with Marshal Bose. That's how he was lampooned. He was given names. He was lampooned. He was called names, told the worst of things, and then today again they turn around and say that no, we made a mistake, he is our hero. But scratch the surface, always scratch the surface. In 1997, the centenary year of Netaji, the Bengali mouthpiece of the Communist Party of India, Marxist CPIM Ganashakti, they brought a special issue on Netaji. It was all praise, all the top leaders, Jyoti Basu, Harkishan Singh Surjit, Nambudiri Pad, name any top leader, all of them were there writing. Everybody full of praise. But at the end of every article, there was one paragraph which started with but. सब कुछ अच्छा है, but he went to the Axis powers. क्या हो जाता अगर वो लोग हमारे देश में आ जाते? If British had lost and if the Germans and the Japanese had come to rule our country, तब क्या हो जाता? कहाँ जाता हमारा world revolution? So that is, you scratch the surface whenever you talk to leftist, any leftist. And I'm not casting any personal, any individual aspersion on anybody. I have been a leftist myself, so I know how it works. Many of you are from Vishwavarati here. I am a student of Vishwavarati, and it was the fort of the student wing of the Congress, and there I was with the SFI. So I have my experience. Now so we are covering the political spectrum, so why should I leave out the Hindutwas? There has been a recent phenomenon, a recent development, saying that Netaji was an Islamist appeaser. And this has come from the political right, from the extreme political right. They are not happy with anything, unless somebody like almost dresses like a Naga sadhu and says continuously, keeps chanting mantras, they are not happy. So even Netaji is an Islamist appeaser. Why? Because he changed the national anthem from Vande Mataram. He was not even happy with Jana Gana Mana. He had to write it in Hindustani. He recommended Hindustani as the national language, as a national link language. So all these are pointers that he was appeasing Muslims. They failed to see the big picture that one man in such a short span of time going out of his country could organize such hundreds of thousands of people around him who forgot to think about their religious creed, who forgot to fight in the name of religion. And this became the main headache of the British administrators when the INA soldiers were coming back. There are intelligence reports. If you go to the archives and read, there are intelligence reports. You don't have to go to the archives, you can read the book. But if you read the reports, it says that these people have forgotten their religious divisions. That did not mean that they were deracinated or de-religiosized, or use any fancy term, whatever you like. They were religious, they were deeply religious. All of them were. But it meant something different. In front of country, when a nation was being attempted to be built, they had a different task, a different goal, a different dream. And playing up religion to make an obstacle to reach that goal was not acceptable to these people. That is one side. The other side is people who make these kind of charges today are talking with the benefit of hindsight. The way religious extremism, Islamic fundamentalism have developed from the 1970s, no one, not a single person in the 1930s or 40s or even in the 50s could have foreseen that. Nobody. So if these so-called experts now cast aspersion on someone like even Netaji, they don't even leave Netaji. It's a very sad story. Because as a person, as an individual, he was deeply religious. Not only religious, his religion was, he was a practicing Hindu, not a theoretical Hindu. And his Hinduism differed very, very much from the Gandhian Hinduism. That variety, that brand was very different. And he was doing sadhana. Whenever Subhas Bose, wherever he was in a prison, it was his trademark. Everybody has testified to this fact, whoever has been in a prison with him, that whenever he was put in a cell, he would cover up one corner of his cell with bed sheet or a curtain. And that small corner would be his puja room, his place for sadhana. So he would go into deep meditation, he would do proper sadhana and read up. He was reading up Tantra and everything, not flaunting it, but he was deeply religious. He was the same person who was also wondering that why are other religions proselytizing? They are going out and converting, why can't Hindus do it? So he is not only keeping it personal, he is bringing it in the public space also, but at the same time, he is scolding some Hindus for some of their actions, but he is also scolding the hardline Muslims for some of their other actions. So he was not, he was religious individually, publicly, socially, not flaunting it, but not hiding it either. But he would not allow to play off one community against another for electoral gains. That's what he would not allow. That was not appeasement. And there is no question of appeasement anywhere, any day. Give me one example, I will give you an explanation why there was a reason for nation building. Whatever he did for nation building. It was not to gain votes or to gain favor, curry favor with any particular person or community or anything like that. Now this is the biggest and the most critical factor. And it is something that troubles our politicians till today. They don't know how to handle it. This is of course a very big international issue. I don't know how many of you noticed this, or how many of you, if those who did, how many of you remember it. In 2019, in a press conference in the US, an assistant of I think Republican senator, he's a Bengali fellow. He wore a T-shirt that had Netaji's photo in front, and I'm talking of 2019, right? There was a hue and cry in the American media saying that how can US Senator's political aide, political assistant, wear a T-shirt with the face of an Axis collaborator, a Nazi sympathizer. That rabid reaction happened in 2019. So just imagine what would have been the reaction if he was around after the Second World War. This is something really, it runs deep around the world in the Western democracies, much more than we realize. One of our friends who was writing a fictional book on Netaji and his post-1945 life, and he approached a publisher in the UK. I have his email still, that email from the publisher. So my friend forwarded it to me. They loved his book. They loved his writing. They loved the story. But they say we cannot publish it, because Subhas Bose as a character is detested in our country. And these are words I am not creating. These were words of the publisher, the head of the publishing house. So that's still, we and our people like us in our country, the elite intellectuals who mostly are either Congress or left oriented still, we love to impress the Western world. We are never courageous enough to make our own stand, take our own stand, and make them show our point of view. That the justification of Subhas Bose taking the help of the Axis bloc, what was the truth? Was he sympathizing with their inhuman behavior, with the Nazi behavior? No, absolutely not. He was probably not even aware of the Holocaust, the time when he was there. He was kept isolated. He was focusing on one particular aspect. Of course, there was racism. Did he speak out against racism? He did. Right from 1933, he spoke to the powers in those countries. On their face, he protested, he condemned, and wherever he came across any such instance of racism, he never kept quiet. He stood beside the students who were being persecuted. He stood beside the Indian political workers who were being persecuted, and he raised his voice, wrote letters, met the leaders of those countries, never kept quiet. So don't tell me that he was collaborating with the heinous activities of the Nazi or the Axis bloc. So let me read this quote to you. It's fascinating. It's a quote about Mussolini. Subhas Bose went to the Axis power and he is called an Axis collaborator by the Western intellectuals, and we are very happy. हम मान लेते हैं, वो बोल दिया, उन्होंने बोला तो सही बोला होगा. जो गोरे बोलते हैं तो सही बोलते होंगे, हमें क्या पता. So this is a quote about Mussolini, and this was spoken in 1937. If I had been an Italian, I'm sure I would have been wholeheartedly, from start to finish, with the fascismo's triumphant struggle against the bestial appetites and passions of Leninism. बहुत पुराना सा अंग्रेजी है. What it basically means is that if I were an Italian, I would have wholeheartedly supported Mussolini's campaign. I am so impressed with him, the way he is fighting against the leftist forces, against Leninism, and itna he is so I could not help being charmed, as so many other people have been, by his gentle, simple bearing and his calm, detached poise. I mean, आसमान पे चढ़ा दिया है मुसोलिनी को. कौन है ये बंदा? Any guess? कौन है? कौन हो सकता है? No. ये उनके बहुत ऊपर है. He comes from the land which led this character assassination of Netaji. This quote is from Winston Churchill. How did how did this guy Mussolini come up as a political leader? He was recruited by one of the British diplomats with a weekly fee, and that's how he came up as a politician. And the politician who recruited him also wrote India's constitution for 1935. So these are the people who have brought them up, and when they turn against them, try to help India, they have a problem. That's international politics and diplomacy. This is one of Netaji's letter in 1934, I guess, writing to Franz Theophilder, one of the National Socialists, one of the Nazi leaders in one of the ministries in Germany, writing in very strong language, protesting कि ऐसा अगर आप करते रहोगे, we have no future relation. India will not have any future relation with Germany. This was the, in short, the thing about Netaji being an Axis collaborator. Now, before I end, just एक दो छोटे point मैं आपको बताना चाहूँगा, and then I will take questions if you have questions. One of the most important things that you must realize about the difference between the traditional politicians in India and Subhas Bose is the language of politics. और ये language of politics जो हमने सीखा है, ये है Gandhian, which was taken over by Pandit Nehru, and that is how we have continued. आज भी most politicians talk in that language. क्या है वो language? वो language ये है कि आप किसी भी एक मुद्दे में ऐसे बोलो कि लोग समझ ना पाए कि आप इधर हो या उधर हो. Always keep an exit point open. Always keep an exit point open. If you think I'm exaggerating, please spend one evening listening to spokespersons of political parties on TV channels. Just spend one evening. That will be enough. पकड़ नहीं पाओगे. They always keep their exit points open. Subhas was very different. He was straight, direct. जो करना है वो करना है, वो बोलेंगे, जो बोलेंगे वो करेंगे, जो करेंगे वो बोलेंगे. There are no double meaning things. तो गांधी जी से जब लुई फिशर पूछ रहे हैं 1942, 43, 45 जब मिल रहे हैं उस टाइम पे around 44, 45 कि what do you want? ब्रिटिश जाए या रहे? चाहिए क्या आपको? क्विट इंडिया मूवमेंट वायलेंट हो गया, आप कंट्रोल नहीं कर पाए, आपको वो भी पसंद नहीं है, तो आप चाहते क्या है? तो गांधी जी बोल रहे हैं मैं तो चाहता हूं कि अंग्रेज आज ही देश छोड़ के चला जाए, पर मैं उनको एम्बैरस नहीं करना चाहता हूं. ठीक है ना? अब जब आप घर जाएंगे, रात को जब सोएंगे, just try to think of what this means. And in contrast, वहां पे खड़े होके सुभाष बोस बोल रहे हैं कि भगाओ इनको, तो वो पसंद नहीं आ रहा उनको. कैसे बोल दिया भगाओ, हम नॉन वायलेंट है भाई. So what does that mean? And the other thing was also Subhas का जो formula था, which came back as a electoral campaign in 2014. It was first given by Subhas Bose in 1939. India first. India must think of her interest first. पहले हिंदुस्तान की इंटरेस्ट, बाद में हम देखेंगे और क्या है क्या नहीं है. दूसरे देशों में अंदर क्या हो रहा है, their internal politics is their headache, it's not our problem. Why should we go on as a preacher, as moral guardians around the world? Every country have their own set of problems. It is up to them to decide how they want to deal with it. Why should we teach them, preach them, and pretend that we are the know-alls in this world? Let us first get our own independence. पहले हम आजाद तो बने, फिर हम सिखाएंगे यूएसए को कैसे अच्छा इंसान बनना है. हम खड़े नहीं हो सकते एक अंग्रेज के सामने और हम यूएस को जाके वहां बता रहे हैं कि अच्छा इंसान कैसे बनना चाहिए. So his politics of language was very different, and that set him apart from the entire gang. And that, ये इतने सारे जो divisions है, इतने सारे जो differences है, ये आज भी इनके दिमाग में है. That is why they still can't wholeheartedly accept him. They can't ignore him because Subhas Bose is perhaps the only example in this world who have been institutionally, officially ignored and still being remembered by millions of people. तो इनको समझ में नहीं आया है कि इनको सप्रेस तो करने की कोशिश कर रहे पर बंदा जाता नहीं है, करे क्या? जितनी बार हम इसको हटाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं उतनी डबल फोर्स लेकर आप वापस आ जाते हैं. So they can't ignore him, they can't accept him. So he is like Trishanku, they have kept him somewhere in between. So this is also one of the reasons why we still don't know officially the official acceptance about the truth of his disappearance has not come yet. This is one of the reasons. They don't know how to handle, not yet. He was way ahead of his time. He did things that इन लोगों को समझ के बाहर है कि हम हैंडल कैसे करेंगे. This is again, I'm just sharing just for the lighter moments. This is the cartoon. This how desperate was Gandhiji to get friendship. So he is trying to get India and Britain married during the Vijayadashmi. So we hug, कोलाकुली बोलते हैं बांग्ला में. And so that's the viceroy. He won't budge. He won't bend down. Gandhiji is trying to get him down and give him a hug. He won't budge. So that was how desperate they were. When Pandit Nehru is being so friendly with Mountbatten and Mountbatten's wife, so what's the name Netaji used? Most people don't know. Netaji gave a name for Mountbatten. Mountbatten was known for his, apparently for his expertise in amphibious warfare. So Netaji gave him the name properly, an amphibious monster. आपको लगता है वो बंदा जब इंडिया में आके वाइसरॉय बना, he would have any softness or show any kindness to नेताजी? ये और बात है that अगर नेताजी होते उस समय हमारे देश में तो ये आते ही नहीं है, इनको आने की जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ती. Because of this, because of the IIT trials. And this is another sore point for the Gandhians. The impact, ये जो फोटो है ना, ये लाहौर की फोटो है 1946. तो 3 जो INA सोल्जर्स थे जिनका रेड फोर्ट में ट्रायल हो रहा था, when they reached Lahore, this was the crowd, some few lakhs, who gathered there on their own. Nobody brought them. किसी ने लिफलेट नहीं बांटा, किसी ने अनाउंस नहीं किया. इनको पता चला आ रहे हैं, बस उसके लिए these people gathered at the Lahore railway station. 46, आज की लाहौर की सोचिए, आज भी लाहौर ऐसा ही होता शायद. तो this impact not only scared the British, they scared the Congress too. And they wanted to take benefit, they wanted to exploit the situation. ये हमने conundrum में बहुत डिटेल में लिखा है, ये बायोग्राफी में भी मैंने डिटेल में लिखा है, आपको फुर्सत मिले तो पढ़िएगा. It will take time to explain every nitty-gritty, but the crux of it was that the British were equally interested in suppressing this movement as the Congress was. The Congress wanted to take as much benefit as possible because उस टाइम पे इलेक्शन होने वाला था. 1945-46 इलेक्शंस हो रहे थे सेंट्रल लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली और प्रोविंशियल असेंबलीज के लिए, जिसके बेसिस पे फिर इंटरिम गवर्नमेंट बनेगा. तो इलेक्शन जीतना है. 45 में बाहर आए हैं सारे जेल से. बाय इन 45 जून द लीडर्स वर रिलीज. टिल दैट टाइम एवरीबॉडी वाज इन जेल. तो कांग्रेस के पास कोई वो नहीं था, एजेंडा नहीं था, करेंगे क्या. इन सितंबर 1945 कांग्रेस वर्किंग कमेटी के मीटिंग हो रहा है, वहां पे सरदार पटेल इज वाइनिंग सेइंग दैट इन लोगों ने बोला था कि अब जंग खत्म हो जाएगा तो आजादी दे देंगे, अभी कुछ बोल नहीं रहे हैं. And this, I'm not joking, I'm not making this up. These are all published records. 45 सितंबर, तब तक कोई एजेंडा नहीं है, क्या करना है एक्सेप्ट कंस्ट्रक्टिव एक्टिविटी. स्पिन द चरखा, खादी बनाओ, आजादी के जंग लड़ो खादी के साथ. तो दैट वाज द सिचुएशन. this repercussion of the people, this scared the British. They realized that they had lost the loyalty of the Indian soldier. They could not trust the Indian soldier anymore. वो हाथ से निकल गए हैं. And जो वर्ल्ड वॉर लड़के वापस आ रहे हैं, तो एक तो है आईएनए के सोल्जर्स, दूसरा है ब्रिटिश इंडियन आर्मी के जो इंडियन सोल्जर्स हैं, who were being decommissioned and they were being sent back to their homes in the villages. So they had seen the INA soldiers. They were deeply influenced. जो आर्मी में तब भी है, a big chunk of them are influenced. They are impressed. They are helping the INA guys. So the British authorities realized that we have lost the grip. We have lost our main weapon with which we were controlling this entire subcontinent, this entire area. उसके बाद immediately जो होता है रॉयल इंडियन एयरफोर्स और रॉयल इंडियन नेवी में म्यूटिनी. अनथिंकेबल. तो इतना वोलाटाइल, इतना वॉल्केनिक सिचुएशन है दैट लंदन में अ ग्रुप ऑफ एमपीज गो टू मीट द प्राइम मिनिस्टर एटली. उनको सीधा साफ बोलता है कि देखिए भाई, हमारे साथ पास दो ऑप्शन है, या तो हम खुद अपने आप निकल के आ जाए, या ये लोग हमें लात मार के वहां से निकाले. आप बताओ आपको क्या चाहिए. और इनको ठंडा, ये जो मूवमेंट चल रहा है, रॉयल इंडियन नेवी का जो इतना वॉल्केनिक सिचुएशन है, लोग मर रहे हैं, गोली चल रही है, राइटिंग हो रहा है, आईएनए ट्रायल्स के अगेंस्ट जो प्रोटेस्ट चल रहा है पूरे देश भर में, इनको ठंडा करने के लिए कौन आया जमीन पे, कौन उतरे? पंडित नेहरू, सरदार पटेल, महात्मा गांधी के अभी शांत हो जाओ, नॉन वायलेंट हो जाओ, आजादी आ जाएंगे, हमें बात करने दो, तुम लोग डिस्टर्ब मत करो. That's the kind of leadership we have had, who would, for the requirement, for the temporary benefit, would stoke the passions, but when it comes to the crux, would always desert them. ये बहुत बार सुन चुके हैं आप लोग सभी, I am quite sure, but I would just, for the sake of completion, I will play this because it's always a pleasure to listen to this. This is Baba Saheb Ambedkar telling BBC why he thought Attlee ran away so fast. ऐसा क्या हो गया? 1945 अगस्त में तो जंग खत्म हुई, 1946 के एंड में ऐसा क्या हो गया that 1947 के उसमें they had to declare, 1947 February में Attlee had to declare that the British will leave by June 1948. That is February 1947. That announcement comes from Attlee. And within 3 months, that entire calendar schedule is revised. And Mountbatten says, nahi, 48 June nahi, we are leaving in August 1947. क्या हो गया?
I do not know how suddenly Mr. Attlee agreed to give independence. That's a matter of secret which Mr. Attlee one day, I think, will disclose in his autobiography, how he came to do that. You see, but nobody ever expected. This is such a sudden change of front. Nobody ever expected. It seems to me, from the analysis that I make about it, there are two things which I think led, to the Labour Party to take this decision. One is the national army that was raised by Subhas Chandra Bose. The British had been ruling this country in the firm belief that whatever may happen, in this country, and whatever the politician may do, they will never be able, to change the loyalty of the soldier.
So he's basically saying the same thing, that the British politicians never believed that they could lose the loyalty of the the Indian soldiers in the British Indian Army. And then they realized because of Subhas Bose and his INA. And if you want to believe that this is only the opinion of Ambedkar, then let me tell you that the same opinion, almost verbatim, has been recorded on the other spectrum of political belief by Savarkar. In his last interview to Organizer, he said almost exactly the same thing, that why did the British have to leave so quickly? It was because Subhas and his INA, the impact on the RIN mutiny, the RIAF mutiny. And because of their brown skin, if you still don't want to believe them, then you have to believe the man who gave us freedom, Attlee, white skin, who went around multiple times telling people that they had to leave because of the INA and Subhas, the RIN mutiny. So this is something that is unacceptable to our standard narrative that has been very carefully built over the last 75 years. What is that narrative? The narrative is that the British left because of our non-violent, loving request movement. हम बैठ गए, आंसू बहाए, प्यार से बोले भैया जाओ, बोला ठीक है, चलते हैं, बाय. So, if anybody tells you that the British left because of the Gandhian movement, because of the non-violent movement, please ask that person to give one example of a Gandhian movement after 1932. मजाक है. 1932 में गांधीयन मूवमेंट खत्म होता है, उसके बाद 15 साल लगते हैं इनको वो इम्पैक्ट समझने में. ये लोग क्या कर रहे थे, अपने आईएनए सोल्जर्स क्या कर रहे थे, लोग जो अपने जान दे रहे थे म्यूटिनी में, रॉयल इंडियन नेवी में जो कर रहे थे, वो क्या कर रहे थे? What was their role then? I mean, there's a limit to building fairy tale, but that fairy tale is very important for our existence because we have to impress the Western world. We have to be in their good books. We can't speak the truth. We can't tell the British on their face that you had to run away because of Subhas Bose and the INA. We have to tell them that we are friends, we are good, you are good. So that this is.
I do not know how.
And this is the possibly the only, because Attlee never spoke or recorded his views, but he told Justice P. Phanibhushan Chakraborty, and this is the letter. Luckily, this facsimile has remained. This is one, I count this as a blessing that Phanibhushan Chakraborty, Justice Chakraborty wrote that letter to a historian of the stature of Ramesh Chandra Majumdar, and Majumdar published that facsimile in his autobiography. We are trying our best to get hold of the original letter, but our regard for history is very, very low in this country. People don't give the proper value to these documents. So we don't know whether we will be able to do that. We have not even been able to find, ये अनुज पागल हो रहा है एक साल से एक फोटो निकालने के लिए कि Attlee राजभवन when he was visiting the governor's palace, कुछ तो फोटो होगा. He has not been able to get it yet. So these are the then main factors. I will not go into this politics of it right now, but this is what has made him inconvenient nationalist. He stands towering above everybody else, and वो जो jealousy factor होता है, that he towers above everybody else so high, the remaining almost look like pygmies. Even the tallest of them look like a pygmy in front of him. ये बात हजम नहीं होते. And there are other political developments, currents, strands, which our current political establishment still don't know how to handle. That's why he has remained an inconvenient nationalist. और इसका repercussion क्या है on the disappearance mystery, that's what we will talk about tomorrow. So that's all for today. Thank you.
Can I just request the audience to give him a standing applause?
Not required, it's okay. Very cool. Thank you. Thank you.
So it has took us 3 long years to make this dream come true. If anybody of you have any questions, then please do raise hands so that our volunteers, okay, then please sit down and then raise hands so that we can, arrange our volunteers with mics as well. Sir, Ritwij sir, I can see your hand first, so.
Only one request, don't ask questions on the disappearance mystery part. That's something that we will deal with tomorrow.
Yes, thank you, sir. It's a wonderful presentation and lecture. I'm really thankful. for having you here. I have just one question. Subhas Chandra Bose was Bengali, and he was a proud Bengali nationalist. No doubt about that. Even today also, Bengalis are, I think, educated Bengalis are very confused about Subhas Chandra Bose, whether to own him or disown him or criticize him. That is a big kind of, mystery. I don't know why. You can answer better. Even yesterday, when this statue was unveiled, that time also leading Bengali, like Kolkata-based newspapers, both in Bengali and English, they haven't published in that way, like they're covering Rahul Gandhi's visit or some other things. Yeah. So maybe it would be.
Yeah, see,
you can shed some light.
See, the thing is that. See, I don't want to get political, but these are indicative that the most widely read English newspaper of Calcutta doesn't carry the news in the front page. The most vociferous lady member of parliament from Bengal, who shouts and tears of papers and is very impressive. She doesn't feel the need to even write one small tweet. She tweets about the death of Elizabeth, but she doesn't find it necessary or important enough to mention the erection of Netaji's statue. Now this hasn't happened overnight. Because if you remember when I was talking about the Gandhian coterie and when Subhash was thrown out of Congress in 1939, so the Gandhian High Command created a team of Bengali leaders to take control of Congress in Bengal. As long as Subhash was there, they could not even stand up. तो इसमें एक मजेदार कहानी I forgot mentioning it, और एक standard आपको सुनने को मिलेगा story कि Subhash was so much against Hindu Mahasabha that उनके लोग जाके हिंदू महासभा की इलेक्शन मीटिंग तोड़ देते थे, पत्थर फेंका, श्यामा प्रसाद मुखर्जी का सर फोड़ दिया. All that is absolutely true. Absolutely true. The unsaid part of the story is equally interesting, जो आपको ये लोग नहीं बताएंगे. जो लोग ये कहानी बताते हैं, बाकी कहानी नहीं बताएंगे आपको. कि सेम ट्रीटमेंट मिला था जो कांग्रेस का हेड था बंगाल में, उनका भी मीटिंग तोड़ दिया, उनको नीचे उतार के कपड़े फाड़ के पेला गया. ठीक से. तो ये नहीं बताएंगे. तो ऑल इज देयर. सो ये है. बट this coterie who was set up by the Gandhian High Command, they took charge of Bengal after independence. They were the people in power. They created the narrative. After them came the communists. तो इनमें प्रो सुभाष नैरेटिव बनने का तो कोई चांस ही नहीं है. To really understand and feel for him and see him what he was for, वो तो कभी मौका मिला ही नहीं. All that people in Bengal have seen is a hero worship, and जहाँ पे ये लेफ्टिस्ट इंडोक्ट्रिनेशन हुआ है, ये हीरो वर्शिप के बाद, as I said, there is always a but. So it ends with that. So I am not surprised by the reaction. It's very natural. It is the effect of brainwashing of the last 70 years. And till the time we are really able to communicate the truth, the true story, things are not going to change. I hope I have answered your question.
Insightful lecture, and I have two small questions. One, you mentioned that at any given time there were 27 spies who were spying on Netaji while he was still in the Congress. So who was the highest identified spy from the Congress for the British?
What do you mean by highest identified?
Yeah, I mean highest in the hierarchy, who was...
मतलब किसके पास 30 होते थे, किसके पास 35 होते थे, उस टाइप का?
No. I'm saying among the people...
अच्छा, who were the highest who were spying with Subhash?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. ये तो बहुत difficult सवाल पूछ लिया आपने.
And sir, second question, how would Netaji, had he become the Prime Minister, looked at the soldiers of the British Indian Army after independence?
अच्छा. Okay. Now, the first part of your question is when Subhash was elected the president, he was selected the president, उस टाइम पे selection होता था, Gandhi ji used to select. तो 37 जब presidential election हुआ, 36 में Nehru was president, 37 में Nehru was president, 38 में Patel did not want to become the president, Maulana Azad didn't want to become the president. तो कौन होगा? नया फेस है. Subhas has just come back from his exile. He has gained a nationwide sympathy wave and his stature is increasing. तो इसको बनाते हैं president. तो president बना, when Gandhi is nominating him as the president, he is also writing to Sardar Patel that I just cannot trust. Subhas is not at all trustworthy. Subhas is not at all trustworthy. तो ये एटीट्यूड लेकर ही उनको बना रहे हैं प्रेसिडेंट. एंड बाय द एंड ऑफ इट 39 हिज टेन्योर, गांधी इज एब्सोल्युटली डेड श्योर कि इनको और मौका नहीं दिया जाएगा. तो ये जो ट्रांजिशन है, एक साल सह लिया, पर दूसरे साल when Subhas is constantly arguing that I have a specific program, very definite program, and I need one more year to implement that program. And the Gandhian High Command won't listen, they won't budge. इसके पीछे जो एक बहुत बड़ा कारण है, one of the reasons is, एक बार गांधी जी को एक चिट्ठी मिला, एक रिपोर्ट मिला. रिपोर्ट मिला उनको फ्रॉम द होम मिनिस्टर ऑफ बॉम्बे. उस टाइम पे जितने प्रोविंसेस थे, 8 प्रोविंसेस में कांग्रेस की मिनिस्टर्स थे. 11 out of 11, 8 provinces had Congress ministries elected in 1937 under the 1935 Act. तो बॉम्बे जो प्रोविंस था उसमें कांग्रेस मिनिस्ट्री था. उसमें प्रीमियर बोलते थे, चीफ मिनिस्टर उस टाइम पे नहीं बोलते थे. प्रीमियर थे बीजी खेर और होम मिनिस्टर थे के एम मुंशी. के एम मुंशी was given a report by the intelligence bureau, which was the central government, which is the British organization. You have to understand properly. एक ब्रिटिश डिपार्टमेंट, एजेंसी, एक कांग्रेसी मिनिस्टर को एक रिपोर्ट पकड़ाता है. वो कांग्रेसी मिनिस्टर उस रिपोर्ट को लेके आते हैं गांधी जी के पास. गांधी जी वो रिपोर्ट पढ़ते हैं एंड देन ही डिसाइड्स कि अब सुभाष को दूसरा मौका नहीं देंगे. क्यों? बिकॉज इन दैट रिपोर्ट it was alleged that Subhas Bose was meeting people, political leaders, Nazi officials from Germany who were in India doing business. वो लोग अपना बिजनेस, ये दिस इज अ स्टैंडर्ड टेक्निक कि जो इंटेलिजेंस के लोग होते हैं, पॉलिटिकल एजेंट्स होते हैं, दे गो एंड ऑपरेट इन अदर कंट्रीज आइदर इन द गार्ब ऑफ अ बिजनेसमैन और थ्रू द एम्बेसीज. तो ये स्टैंडर्ड टेक्निक है. तो वो भी आते थे, इनके लोग भी जाते थे, ऐसा होता है. बट द रिपोर्ट वाज, द एलिगेशन वाज कि ये नाजी लीडर्स जो हिंदुस्तान में आए हैं, इनके साथ सुभाष जाके मिल रहे हैं, बात कर रहे हैं, एंड दे आर प्लानिंग समथिंग. So that was the highest level of planning. This is the topmost level of Congress, जहाँ पे ये spying चल रहा था. हाँ, thank you.
कमेंट पे नहीं है. और गांधी जी को सुभाष बोस को बोलना चाहिए था कि तुम्हारी जासूसी हो रही है, वो उनको नहीं बता रहे हैं. सो दैट इज द आंसर.
The second thing is the attitude towards Indian soldiers जो ब्रिटिश आर्मी में थे. जब तक सुभाष बोस नेताजी अपना आर्मी खड़े किए, इंडियन लीजन इन जर्मनी and Italy, Indian National Army, Southeast Asia में, he inspired the soldiers that were recruited. He criticized the British government, abused the British government, criticized the Congress, Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha, whoever, Communist Party, whoever was against his program, he criticized them. In all these speeches, he did not utter a single critical word against Indian soldiers in the British Indian Army. Not a single word. He was always careful that these are the guys who are either going to be recruited into the INA, or else these are the guys who are going to form the Army of Free India. So he would never utter a word that would demoralize them. And that was not the case of the in Gandhian High Command. Gandhiji himself, I don't want to generalize, but Gandhiji himself often referred to them as mercenaries. And when protests were made, when others protested that ऐसे क्यों बोल रहे हैं, he said that आज ये लोग don't tell me when the अच्छा sorry, I remember the context now. It was that protest came from General Wavell, who was the viceroy. 1943 में वावल गांधी जी को बोल रहे हैं कि आप इनको मर्सनरी क्यों बोल रहे हैं, ये दिस इज वॉलंटरी एनलिस्टमेंट, हमने किसी को जबरदस्ती तो आर्मी में लिया नहीं, किसी को बोला नहीं, जबरदस्ती नहीं किया कि आर्मी में जाओ भर्ती हो जाओ. They have come on their own. We have just said we want soldiers. People have come on their own. This is voluntary enlistment. तो गांधी जी टेल्स वावल के उतना ही पेमेंट दे दो तो वॉलंटरी निकल जाएगा. कल किसी और के साथ अगर लड़ने के लिए बोलोगे, किसी और के लिए लड़ने के लिए बोलोगे, उतना ही पैसा देके they will go and fight for them. So that's the difference. Netaji was dealing with the army. He knew soldiers, he understood the psychology, and he was nurturing them. There was no reason for him to abuse them or be critical of them or say harsh words. But on the other side, from the non-violent side, there was the mentality that these are mercenaries. So that's the difference.
गुड इवनिंग सर. सर लास्ट ईयर पार्लियामेंट्री सेशंस के दौरान ऐसा ऑन पार्लियामेंट्री रिकॉर्ड पहली बार कहा गया था कि भारत के पहली आज़ाद सरकार के पहले प्रधानमंत्री नेताजी सुभाष चंद्र बोस हैं. तो क्या आपको लगता है कि नेताजी और आईएनए के फौजियों को आज के समय पे वो इज्जत मिल रही है या मिल चुकी है जो उनको मिलनी चाहिए थी शुरुआत से?
हाँ, अब ये बताना मुश्किल है, जवाब देना मुश्किल है. हाँ, मोदी जी ने जो बोला था पार्लियामेंट में उस टाइम पे, द सेंटेंस दैट ही यूज्ड वाज दैट नेताजी आज़ाद हिंद के पहला प्रधानमंत्री थे. दैट डजंट रियली मेक सेंस. आज़ाद हिंद का एक ही प्रधानमंत्री थे, वो नेताजी थे, उसके पहले और आखिरी को कुछ नहीं है. Yesterday, last evening, he made a more categorical statement. He said, नेताजी अखंड भारत के पहला प्रधानमंत्री थे. That makes sense. That makes sense, and that is a very categorical statement. कल मोदी जी ने अपने स्पीच में बहुत कुछ बोला है, कुछ डायरेक्टली बोला है, कुछ हिंट दिया है. दोबारा सुनिएगा. एक्सपेक्टेशन तो है, अब क्या होगा पता नहीं. Whether INA soldiers have got their due, I don't know. It's very difficult to say. No, they haven't. Really, they haven't. Because इतना टाइम बीत गया है 45 के बाद. And the first time they were offered pension was when I think it was in the late 70s or early 80s. तब तक तो ज़्यादातर गुजर गए हैं. They had to live in very difficult conditions, in pathetic conditions. बहुत लोग ऐसे भी थे जो दूसरों के घर जाके बर्तन मांजते थे, दूसरों के घर जाके काम करते थे, कोई ट्रक चलाते थे, कोई some of them were well-to-do because they came from well-to-do families, but the majority of them had to live a very difficult life, and they were not at all given that recognition, that honor which was due to them. कैसे होगा जब वापस आ रहे हैं और हमारे अहिंसावादी बोल रहे हैं इनको हम अपने आर्मी में नहीं लेंगे, इनको भेज दो, फार्मर्स बना दो, because they are very strong people, they can go and do very good farming. And I'm not joking. ये स्टेटमेंट है, प्रिंटेड पब्लिश स्टेटमेंट है महात्मा गांधी का. The Indians, Sardar Patel, Pandit Nehru, they won't allow these guys to go back to the Indian army. So obviously it's very insulting. Given the role that they played, the insult that they had to face for those 60, 70 years, I think that's very dehumanizing. And उसके मुकाबले अभी जो मिल रहा है, that is far better, but it's I don't think it will ever compensate the kind of degrading treatment that they had to face. जी बताइए.
Or why intolerance towards the ANA soldiers? They could have very well sort of been absorbed, and I'm trying to understand the mentality. Was there opposition from the Indian army, the people in the Indian army as well? Why the soldiers were punished?
The soldiers were not taken in because there was fear कि एक तो है technical difficulty, because the soldiers in the British Indian Army remained loyal, so they were fighting for Britain. दिखाया गया कि they were fighting for India, but India was not fighting a war. Nobody attacked India. It was not India's war. That is what the Congress kept arguing. But when the war ended and power was very close and they were so desperate to get power in their hands, they started singing the same tune, saying that अब ये soldiers हिंदुस्तानी हैं, अब इनको साथ हमारा हिंदुस्तानी आर्मी बनाना है. So how can we have two groups, those who revolted against the British and fought for their country and those who continued to fight for British? हम इन दोनों को एक साथ कैसे लाएंगे? ये प्रॉब्लम था. It was a genuine problem, but if there was a genuine leader, a nationalist, genuine nationalist leader, there is no reason why this could not have been solved. But reason वही था. ये अंग्रेजों को पसंद नहीं था ना. अंग्रेज कैसे एक्सेप्ट कर लेंगे भाई ये हमारे खिलाफ लड़के आ रहे हैं? तो व्हाट वाज द केस अगेंस्ट द INA सोल्जर्स? द ट्रायल क्या था? आफ्टर ब्रिटिश ने, ब्रिटिश तो फिजिकली चले गए, हमारे दिमाग से दिल से थोड़ी ना गए हैं. तो हाँ ब्रिटिश चले गए फिजिकली भी, बोल क्या बोल रहा हूं. हु वाज द हेड ऑफ द Indian Navy till 1958? It was a British officer. Who was the head of the Air Force? Who was the first Indian head of chief of India's Air Force? Subrata Mukherjee. Subrata Mukherjee कब बने? 1955. The army head was there till I think end of 1948. 1949 में I think Cariappa became the chief. I don't remember exactly, but they were there, very much there.
So given the shortage of time, maybe we will take a few more questions and then.
Yeah, tell me.
Thank you for giving such an interesting and engaging talk. It was, I mean, as you have clearly pointed out, he is a king without literally a kingmaker, whereas everybody else has been kings with kingmakers all around them. And he has, I mean, as people who, even though they have not read about Netaji, what they know is that he had tremendous guts, if I may say that, because he went to do things, he went into places that nobody could even imagine. I mean, आज अगर हम लोगों को कहेंगे कि अफगानिस्तान में क्या हो रहा है, वो कहेंगे कोहली ने सेंचुरी मारा. तो ये है इंटरनेट का ज़माना, और ये 30s और 40s के बारे में हम कह रहे हैं जबकि लोगों के पास कोई ज़रिया नहीं था, और उन्होंने ऐसे जगहों पे जाके मारा है, लाइक लिटरली उनके घर में जाके घर में घुस के मारा है. लेकिन ये करने के लिए उनको भी किसी ने प्रोत्साहन किया होगा, किसी से उन्हें इंस्पिरेशन मिला होगा. क्या आप हमारे यूथ के लिए, क्योंकि हमारी यूथ आज जो सुनेंगे हमारे बच्चे 20 साल बाद वही याद रखेंगे, तो क्या आप हमारे यूथ को, जो यहाँ पे मैक्सिमम जो मेजॉरिटी है 19 to 24 ईयर ओल्ड स्टूडेंट्स, उनके लिए बता सकते हैं एक दो ऐसे पर्सनालिटीज़ जिन्होंने सुभाष चंद्र बोस को शायद इंस्पायर किया होगा, और कौन थे ये पर्सनालिटीज़ और कैसे उन्होंने इंस्पायर किया? थैंक यू.
देखिए, एग्जाम्पल्स अगर आप चाहते हैं मैं एग्जाम्पल्स दूं कि किन लोगों ने उनको इंस्पायर किया है. एक है जो अंदर का स्पिरिचुअल फोर्स होता है, उसके लिए ही वॉज प्रोबेबली मोर देन एनीबडी एल्स ही वॉज इंस्पायर्ड बाय स्वामी विवेकानंद. ही वॉज ऑल्सो इंस्पायर्ड टू अ ग्रेट एक्सटेंट बाय ऋषि अरविंदो, बट Swami Vivekananda, my feeling, my reading is that he had more influence in preparing him as a man right from the childhood. अब आगे जाके जो influences होते हैं, that is the thing that life में एक या दो influences नहीं होते हैं. We build ourselves in a manner कि हम अपने चारों तरफ से once we create a framework, once we know what is the end objective, Yeah, can we go back to that thing, to the presentation? लाइफ में आपका फाइनल गोल, इफ इट इज क्लियर टू यू कि आप करना क्या चाहते हैं, मैं डॉक्टर इंजीनियर बनने की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ, एज अ मच बिगर लार्जर स्केल गोल आप क्या करना चाहते हैं, देन यू स्टार्ट लुकिंग फॉर those sources, those inspirations, those personalities. And here this is why I had put up this slide. These 3 lines, this is the goal that he set for himself when he was 18 years old. एक 18 साल का लड़का लिख रहे हैं अपने दोस्त को वो जिंदगी में क्या करना चाहते हैं, क्या बनना चाहते हैं, किस तरह का इंसान बनना चाहते हैं. This is what is right. That I want to be, the ideal person for me must be an embodiment of the past, product of the present and prophet of the future. Embodiment of the past, our history, our heritage, our culture, it holds a lot of meaning. It shapes our thought, our own outlook, what kind of human beings we should become. But we should not get lost in history only. We have to be rooted in our history, but we have to be a product of the present. Rooted hokar, we have to be aware of every little thing that is happening around us. And combine those two, and then be able to look into the future. कल कैसा होने जा रहा है, किस तरह की दुनिया बनने जा रहा है. So combine this. This is an amazing strand of thought from an 18-year-old, even in those days. So एक बार ये तय हो गया, then he went on assimilating, accumulating knowledge, information, and working hard to build himself. It's not only theoretical. His knowledge, his information was not only theoretical. It was practical. If it was religion, he was doing sadhana. If it was political, he was in the political field experimenting. If it was social, he was also trying to bring in social changes. So it's a very difficult struggle that one has to go through. It doesn't come easily. And इसका कल्मिनेशन जो है, कल हम जिसके बारे में बात करेंगे, द क्लाइमैक्स ऑफ दिस, वेयर इट ब्रिंग्स हिम एज अ डिफरेंट पर्सन, वेयर एवरी, आई जस्ट गिव अ टॉक, TEDx talk in Indore, where I spoke about what kind of personality he was. I mean, why he was a successful man, why he was a successful leader, what were the traits, characteristic traits. I didn't talk about his politics, so I just gave the example. दो मेन कैरेक्टरिस्टिक ट्रेट्स उनमें जो था, वन इज मेटिकुलस प्लानिंग. ही ऑलवेज प्लान्ड फॉर थिंग्स. ही प्लान्ड नॉट ओनली वन प्लान, देयर वाज ऑलवेज अ बैकअप प्लान और 2 बैकअप प्लान्स, प्लान A, B, C. एंड द सेकेंड थिंग इज, इफ यू फॉलो हिज लाइफ, इतना मुश्किलों का सामना करना पड़ा है. देयर आर सो मेनी हर्डल्स, सो मेनी ऑब्स्टेकल्स. We give up so easily. Exam में खराब marks आए हैं, we are depressed. We don't get the dress that we want to buy, we are depressed. खाना जो मुझे चाहिए वो नहीं मिल रहा है, we are depressed. झगड़ा हो गया किसी से, depressed. To the extent, given the societal pressures, we give up for such small things. This man, just imagine, he goes to study into presidency, he's thrown out. क्या कर लेते हैं आप उनकी जगह पे होते तो? He fights, struggles, comes back, gets into another college. He is sent to Cambridge, to England, with a condition. Does he give up or does he take the challenge? He takes the challenge, he does brilliantly in ICS, and then acts according to his own wish. He gives up the ICS and comes back and joins politics. Politics join करते हैं, क्या होता है? CEO बनते हैं, which is a very good thing, great achievement. But 6 महीने के अंदर उनको फेंक दिया जाता है एक दूर दराज पे prison में, Burmese prisons, under pathetic conditions, where his health breaks down. Does he give up? No, he utilizes that time to build himself, prepare himself for the political life, for the spiritual life. He uses that time. वापस आते हैं, झगड़ा होता है, he is constantly sidelined, cornered by the Gandhian leadership, by the non-violent Ahinsavadi leadership. Does he give up? No. He fights for his place, he makes his place, everything. And how does he do it? It continues. I can give you example after example after example, puri sham lag jayegi, but how does he do it? That is the second trait. His ability to reinvent himself at every corner of life. जब भी कोई मुश्किल आ रहा है, life is finished. 1940 in July, when he is thrown to British prisons, his life is finished. There is no chance that he would be let out of prison as long as the war goes on. कोई chance नहीं है. He knows life is finished. What does he do? Does he give up? No. He reinvents. He gets out of the jail. He goes out of the country. Unthinkable even today. And how could he do it? Because he planned for it. ये बाहर जाने का plan on the spot नहीं हुआ था. This he had been planning for the last 1 year. तो वो backup plan था. People were prepared. Things were in place. All he had to do is to come out, pick it up and activate it, go out. So ऐसा आदमी 1945 में अगस्त में जब जंग खत्म हो गए, everything is gone. Japan has surrendered. The European Axis powers are demolished, completely destroyed. He has no other way other than surrendering. Does he surrender? No. He finds a new way. He finds a new route. So, inspiration बहुत होंगे, लोग होंगे. We have to find our inspirations. But it's what you do, how you utilize that information, that knowledge. और टाइम है? Or are we done?
टाइम तो आप लोगों के लिए बहुत कम पड़ जाएगा, but we will try to take maybe 3 more questions. The first one being and then
Yeah.
Any connection?
Yeah. Subhas Bose ka first thing was to get involved and build upon the revolutionary network पूरे देश में, not only in Bengal. He had a solid network in Bengal. Unfortunately, in Bengal, the two main political, the revolutionary groups started fighting with each other, and there were splinter groups who again started fighting with each other, and that had a very unfortunate repercussion on the political life of Bengal. But overall talking, when Subhas was very much involved with the top leaders who were forming the Hindustan Socialist Republican Army, and they all, till the end, they gave their support to Subhas. But specific with Bhagat Singh, शायद 1928 में Bhagat Singh had come to Kolkata just before the Kolkata Congress. They had a meeting. It is also said that Bhagat Singh was carrying a document, some plan for building a revolutionary organization before he was arrested, and that finally reached the hands of Subhas Bose. But there is no other documentary evidence. These are all anecdotal evidence, claims made by their relatives, brothers and revolutionary associates. And of course, when Bhagat Singh's trial was going on, Subhas used to go and meet them in the courtroom. In the prison, they wouldn't be allowed, but in the courtroom, sometimes he would go and meet them, talk to them. So there was a very much connection with the revolutionary network. And I was saying that before he left the country, 1940 के जुलाई में उनको prison में डाला गया. तो prison में जाने से बिल्कुल पहले what he was trying to do was he was reactivate Punjab, South India, North India, Benares वगैरह उस जगह पे जो old revolutionary societies centers थे Bengal के, he was trying to bring all of them together on one platform, and he had sent out his people. They were going and contacting people, including, I mean, Gadar revolutionaries थे, इधर सावरकर ब्रदर्स थे, इधर हेडगेवर जी थे, उधर लेफ्टिस्ट जो रेवोल्यूशनरीज थे. सो cutting across political spectrum, political ideological spectrum, he was trying to bring all of them together for a final uprising. ये ब्रिटिश को भी पता था, and he had to be thrown into jail.
जब ब्रिटिश ने आर्मी के लिए वॉलंटरी बेसिस पे रिक्रूट करना शुरू किया था, तो कांग्रेस का क्या स्टैंड था उस टाइम? क्या उन्होंने तब अपोज नहीं किया उसका?
कांग्रेस ने बोला वी प्रोटेस्ट.
सो बाद में फिर उन्होंने जब उसको अलग कर दिया था तो बाद में फिर आर्मी को उन्होंने अलग कर दिया दैट यू रिवोल्टेड अगेंस्ट अस।
मैं समझा नहीं सवाल आपका।
So,
बाद में
बाद में जब ब्रिटिश चले गए थे तो कांग्रेस ने आईएनए को ये बोला था कि यू रिवोल्टेड अगेंस्ट अस, सो व्हाई वुड यू टेक अस?
नो, कांग्रेस डिडंट से यू रिवोल्टेड अगेंस्ट अस। कांग्रेस ने कभी कुछ बोला नहीं। दे वर नेवर ऑनेस्ट एंड दे वर नेवर फोर्थकमिंग। दे जस्ट adopted the logic of the British colonial government. ये तो ब्रिटिश ने बोला, ऑक्टिन लेक ने बोला कि ये हमारे खिलाफ जंग लड़े हैं, हम इनको कैसे ले लेंगे आर्मी में वापस? इनको तो हम अंडमान भेज रहे थे, इनको तो हम फांसी चढ़ा रहे थे। इट इज ओनली बिकॉज ऑफ द रेवोल्यूशन दैट हैपेंड इन दैट टाइम कि हम कुछ कर नहीं पाए, इनको छोड़ना पड़ा। हाउ कुड यू इवन आस्क टू टेक देम बैक इन द आर्मी? प्रभु बोल के गए तो हम भी कैसे ले लेते? तो इसलिए दैट्स द रीजन व्हाई दे वर नेवर टेकन बैक टू द आर्मी। बट वॉलंटरी एनलिस्टमेंट वो हो रहा था कि the British said we need so many people and millions were being recruited, and the Congress said don't take our people, we are protesting. हम कुछ करेंगे नहीं, हम कुछ बट प्रोटेस्ट हम कर लेंगे। तो
all right, so thank you, sir. This was a really wonderful talk. And I have a few somewhat contentious questions on this, if you don't mind.
भैया आप तो मुझे डरा रहे हो, ये सब नोट वोट करके लाए हो ऐसे?
ना सर ये उनकी selected speeches है तो इससे थोड़ा references लेने थे.
Go ahead, I was joking.
So sir, the first one is that is there any point in the in Netaji's ideology that would prevent or could lead towards the devolution of a state under his control into, say, something like a Stalinist or Maoist, dystopia that occurred?
Got your question.
Yeah. So that's one.
Okay.
And the other is that in the Haripura address, he mentions something about the minorities being entitled to keep their personal law. So how do we, with this in mind, how would it be consistent with the goal towards national unity and order? And even in the Bose Jinnah address, if you look, the Bose Jinnah correspondence, if you look at it, there is counterproof to this, saying that national unity is more important than minority interests overall. So how do we explain this divergence?
Okay, so your first question, that if he had taken charge of the country, what is the guarantee that we would not have ended up being a totalitarian state, a Stalinist or a fascist country? Another thing is that it's a funny thing about speculation is that you can never make 100% assertion. कि कोई ऐसा नहीं है कि मैं कुछ बोलूँगा, मेरा व्यूज़ है, आपका व्यूज़ है, हो सकता है, but let's try to be factual and fact based जो deduction होते हैं. So for that, what is the best way? The best way is to follow what he said about the political model of India. Okay, if India becomes independent, what should be the political model that she should follow? That is one part of the evidence. The other part of the evidence is how did Subhas Bose himself, don't forget that while our great Ahimsavadi champions were sitting either in jail or were just protesting, Subhas Bose was actually running two governments. He is the only person amongst all these people who ran a government in Europe, another government in Southeast Asia, raised one army in Europe, raised another army in Southeast Asia. So he was actually running a government. Us government mein, how was he implementing his ideals? That's the second evidence. So one part is theoretical evidence based on his speeches and writings. The other part is the practical evidence. Nowhere do we see any inclination towards a totalitarian behavior. He continuously kept saying that India will follow a democratic constitution, a democratic politics. He had his own ideas. He said that for some initial years, maybe we need to have a very strong central government because आज बोलना मुश्किल होता है, बहुत आसान होता है ये सब के ये फैसिस्ट है, टोटलिटेरियन है, इतना वो है, ये है। भैया 47 में you had to think of the state of the country. Almost universal illiteracy, no health infrastructure, terrible level of poverty, there is no physical infrastructure. How do you raise the level of life, modern life in such a country, in such situations, coming out of a war? So for that, he said, इसमें हम अपना political differences sort करने का, theorize करने का time बहुत मिलेगा, but to be able to do this, at least for the initial years, we need a very strong central government. कुछ लोग इसको distort करके बोल दिया है, we need dictatorship for 20 years, that is bunkum. He said, we need a very strong central government for some initial years. तो वो चाहिए था. But look at the way he conducted his governments, the Azad Hind government and the Free India Center. People had the courage, he encouraged people to walk up to him and say कि मुझे अच्छा ठीक नहीं लग रहा है कि मैं आपको नेताजी बोलूँगा. So he never forced anybody to call him नेताजी. जबकि उनके हर लीडर के चमचे होते हैं, कोई भी हो, ठीक है ना, तो उनके भी थे, तो उन्होंने भी बोला कि इनको नेताजी बोलना पड़ेगा. And there were people in the Free India Center in Germany who were close, nearer to his age, knew him for a long time. They have been associates. They walked up, they could walk up to him and say, Subhash, we don't feel like using that Netaji thing. He said, you don't have to. You call me by my name. So, dictator अगर होते, तो वहीं पे shoot कर देते ना उनको. He had the authority power at that time. Nobody would have questioned him in Germany if he shot somebody. But he discussed it, he said, and those people came back to India later, they wrote their accounts and they were so touched, they were so impressed with it, said that nobody forced us, it came to us later, it came to us naturally, given the personality, his stature, the way he conducted himself, it came to us naturally. Nobody was forced to call him Netaji. तो ये बोलते हैं लोग कि फूरर का हिंदी वर्जन है. Leader, Furrer is the leader, Netaji is the leader chosen by Indian people. It came naturally. He never claimed that call me Netaji. So that is one part, that is the first part of your question. That there was no chance that India would have become a totalitarian or a fascist state. The second part of your question is about minority rights and national interest. As I said, that he had his own political ideas. There are many times when, and this is a debate, discussion which can go in a different tangent. It can go, I mean, अलग ही एक सेशन हो सकता है इस मुद्दे पे, तो ज़्यादा बोलने की ज़रूरत है नहीं. बट ऑल ऑफ अस नो हियर कि जब पूरे समाज की एडवांस की आप सोच रहे हो, किसी स्पेसिफिक इंटरेस्ट को अगर आप बहुत ज़्यादा प्राइमेसी दोगे, तो कलेक्टिव ग्रोथ, कलेक्टिव एडवांस जो है, दैट विल गेट हैम्पर्ड. देयर आर प्रोबेबिलिटीज, देयर आर केसेस, देयर आर एग्जांपल्स. अब होता या नहीं होता उस डिबेट में मैं जाना नहीं चाहता हूं, बट द एग्जांपल दैट यू सेड, द केस दैट यू मेड फॉर योरसेल्फ, आई डोंट सी दैट एज एन इरेशनल और इलॉजिकल. कि आप माइनॉरिटी, he is not denying minority rights. As I said, he ran two governments. Show me one complaint of anyone from the minority communities. Anyone, you don't have to show me two. एक दिखा दीजिए मुझे कि किसी ने बोला है that he was unfair towards minorities and he had any bias against minorities. एक दिखा दीजिए मुझे कहीं पे. नहीं होता है. I mean, see, as I said, ये इस मुद्दे पे discussion can go somewhere else. So, if you want to discuss this further, let's do it outside. But यहाँ पे नहीं है.
I am very sorry to everyone whose questions couldn't be taken, and maybe some questions must be stored because tomorrow we have a firecracker who is sitting right here, who tried all his tricks. So you have seen that Times magazine crosses there. So Anujda came up on his own and did that. So it's better to wrap up here today. It's already 8:30. Thank you very much. We will end up with INA national anthem. The INA version of it, as Chandrachur mentioned, the Hindustani version of it. Please stand up for it. I'll be very thankful for it.
सुख चैन की बरखा बरसे, भारत भाग है जागा। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा, द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा। चंचल सागर विंध्य हिमालय, नीला यमुना गंगा। गुण गाए, तुझसे जीवन पाए, सरतन पाए आशा। सूरज बनकर जग पर चमके, भारत नाम सुभागा। जय हो, जय हो, जय जय हो। भारत नाम सुभागा। सुबह सवेरे पंख बखेरो, तेरे ही गुण गाए। पास भरी भरपूर हवाएं, जीवन में रुत लाए। सब मिलकर हिंद पुकारे, जय आजाद हिंद के नारे। प्यारा देश हमारा, सूरज बनकर जग पर चमके, भारत नाम सुभागा। जय हो, जय हो, जय हो, जय 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 हो। भारत नाम सुभागा।
Good night, everyone, and thank you for your cooperation.
जय हो, जय हो, जय 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 हो।
Achha, just a small announcement. So tomorrow's timing is not 6 p.m. onwards. It's 4:30.